Hi, I'm Peggy Farron, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Hey, to prepare for the upcoming festivities for the 4th of July, we're going to be talking with David Sussman about how to get great shots of fireworks. The Understand Photography Show is first a podcast, so if you're wondering why we don't have any visuals if you're watching us, that's why. Our largest audience is actually on iTunes. But we put this out every Friday at 4 p.m. on both YouTube, Facebook, and then it also goes out on a podcast to everything. Any way that you listen to your podcasts, you can get the Understand Photography Show, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays, every single week. So if you like the show, be sure to subscribe. Also, go to our website, understandphotography.com, and sign up for one of our freebies. We've got all kinds of good stuff, travel tips for photographers, which camera should I buy, how to get tack sharp images every time. That's our most popular download. There's quite a few other things, like what do I need to know as a photographer. Kind of gives you a little checklist. So it's really, really good. And we also have a couple of Facebook groups. We've got one that is a general group that you can ask any kind of questions about photography called it's facebook.com/understandphotography. That will take you to both of our groups. So the first one is just for general questions. You can put pictures up there. We're doing, Joe Fitzpatrick started Wildlife Wednesdays and Monochrome Mondays, so you can share your pictures on those days. The other group is called Selling Your Photography as Art, and that's all about learning how to sell your artwork, asking questions. What do you think about this? Hey, I tried this, it was a great idea, and things like that. So again, both from our Facebook page, Understand Photography. Now, David Sussman, this is the third time he's been on the show because he's really good. So we keep bringing him back, and he keeps coming. He was on episode number 13 talking about commercial photography, on episode 127 about light painting, and now we're going to be talking about fireworks. David's been a commercial and landscape photographer for a long time. He's an artist, he's amazing. You're going to love him. All right, welcome.
Third time's the charm, right?
Let's hope this one works out.
Yeah.
Now, to the audience, he did come, was it last week?
Hey, I believe it was.
And my air conditioner was broken, so we just couldn't do it. It was too hot.
You were hot under the collar.
It was hot. We actually did the first show because we got here. It wasn't that hot in the morning, but boy, by the time you got here, it was hot in here. It's Florida. All right, so let's talk about fireworks. Now, obviously, you know, if you point and shoot with, like, say, your cell phone, you're just going to get a blown out image of the fireworks, and it's not going to be very pretty. So what do we need to do? I mean, how do we start? Do we start by trying to find the best
It depends
place?
on the quality of the fireworks you're looking for, of course. If you're looking for, and it's not that hard, but one, you really need to be shooting manual. Okay, everybody goes manual, ooh, ugh. Manual's not so bad, especially with fireworks. Two, you need to know what ISO is, because I'm going to give you the remedy for shooting the perfect fireworks right now. ISO 200, f11, shutter speed, something longer than 1/10 of a second, and experiment. You can go 30 seconds, you can go a half second, you can go 1/10 of a second. Each one of them will give you a slightly different trail, you know, the painting with light, remember that one? As the thing explodes, if you have 30 seconds, you'll get multiple fireworks as they're sending them up, and so on and so forth. So that's the reason for the tripod. You know, you're going to be shooting longer than usual. I would suggest start with 1 to 5 seconds. Okay, so here you got a tripod. You're shooting ISO 200. You're going to be using a longer shutter speed. You can use bulb. If people don't know what bulb is, you trip the shutter and you're holding the shutter open with a trigger cord or something like that. And it's not rocket science in any means. You can hold it for 1 second, and then look at your LCD. Say you want something a little longer. Hold it down for 5, 10, go on and so forth.
Do you use bulb or do you set the?
I do all kinds of things. I have a lens that has a variable reduction function on it, and it's a super wide lens. And I can actually do a half second with that hand holding it. That's the exemption, and you have to kind of train yourself, breathing and all this stuff to maintain a clear image.
So it doesn't have
but
shutter
it is
shake.
possible to do that, and you don't even need the tripod. But if you're new and want to get better fireworks, put it on a tripod, use a shutter cord.
And now I have something to say about that, because when we do our workshops and people come with those electronic remote shutters, we spend most of the time trying to get those things to work. I say buy the $8 one with the cord.
Absolutely.
It's going to work every time. And
I do not do
it's
any-
$8.
Yep, I always use a cable, an actual cable.
It's just more reliable.
Yes, it's very
And it's
reliable.
easier to use.
You're
There's
not
no
going to
tech.
fight with it. You're not going to have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth issues. All it takes is for somebody next to you to have the same frequency of what you're using in a cell phone, and all of a sudden you get nothing.
Yeah.
Use something that's cable. They're cheap, and they plug in and so on and so forth.
So we need a good tripod. And you know,
Well, you can have a cheap one. You can, but don't bump up against it or anything like that. If you're with a cable and it's laying loose, you know, something from Walmart, you know, these $30 tripods will work.
you think so? But they're not strong enough to
Well, it
hold a
depends on
heavy
your camera.
lens.
If you got an expensive camera, no, get a good tripod.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you got one of the lesser, you can get away with it. If you got a camera that's 2 pounds, and let's use that as a formula. If it's 2 pounds or lighter, you don't need a heavy-duty tripod.
Okay.
Me, on the other hand, no, I've got a $500 tripod. That's just because of the things I do with it, and the cost of the equipment I'm using. But you can use a. I've even leaned up against the wall, okay, and I'm using my finger, and I become the tripod. You'd be surprised how successful you are at fireworks, because basically you're having a you're having a light trace. There's not a lot of details there to maintain and focus, right?
Okay.
Okay, so that's once again why I say the tripod is not necessarily the greatest piece of gear you need for fireworks, unless you're doing 30-second exposures. Then things change.
Yeah.
Where you have somebody, if you're in a crowded situation, fireworks you often are, somebody might bump up against it. Again, that's something you have to evaluate yourself. I know not everybody wants to go out and buy a tripod.
Yeah, but they should. So I am a person who doesn't like to use a tripod, but I'm glad. I always have one with me, and I'm glad when I need it, I need it.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll always be happy that you do have the more expensive tripod. They do pay for themselves. But again, I know a lot of people don't want to. If you're, it depends on the quality of what you're doing down the road. Again, if you have let's say a $300 camera, maybe you don't want to spend $300 for a tripod. How much does your tripod cost, for instance? Just curious.
I think one of them is about I don't have a real expensive one. I think one was about $350 and one was about $250.
Not everybody wants to go out and spend that kind of money.
Yeah.
I
have
like,
two because I got, you're not going to believe this, but one of my customers bought me a nice tripod.
Oh, wow. I don't have those kind of customers.
I am just, I'm like a big fan of this lady. She's been really good to me over the years.
Well, we get into tripods. I like the carbon tripods because they're lighter.
And they're more expensive that
And then
way.
the price starts going up.
Right.
So you can do it with a monopod. Here's I guess this was, again, this is what I call a poor man's tripod, because if you have a monopod and a wall that you can lean up against, you can get away with 3-4 second exposures, but you have to breathe right. You have to, you just can't move around a lot. It's a trained session to get good images with
Yeah.
that. When you get into, but really, if you want consistency, yes, get a tripod. Don't try these other things I'm talking about unless you practice before you go to something like fireworks or whatever else that you might need it for.
All right, let's back way up.
Okay.
Okay, so how do we find the best spot? I mean, do we need to be close? Do we need to be far with a long lens?
I prefer shooting with a wide angle lens, which typically means you're going to get a little closer.
Okay.
Why wide angle lens? It has better depth of field, less worry about focus. Here's another thing, manual focus,
No, we're not.
autofocus.
Okay, but we're not going to go there yet because we're going to go step by step, and you are jumping
I jump
way
all
too
over
fast.
the place, don't I?
We got to slow this down.
Well, location, and that depends on what kind of lens you have. One of the things I do to help determine location is one, Google Maps. Okay, it's great. I also will tend to call the event organizer. Sometimes you can find the information on the web where the fireworks are actually shot from. I go out the day, night, it doesn't matter when, and scout out locations.
Okay, so if I know, like here, we have the fireworks at the Naples Pier, or we have them in the middle of a lake on a barge.
Right.
So how do I know, like, does it matter, like, does wind make a difference?
Oh my God, yes.
So how do we know, how do you know which
well,
way?
Again, there's a software app with Google that'll show you which direction the wind's actually coming from. I wish I could remember the exact name of the, but there's a lot of weather apps you can get.
That'll tell you which direction the wind's
going. It actually
going.
shows the wind currents, because let's face it, if you're downwind from the fireworks, you're going to be covered in ash.
Oh yeah.
So that's important. Not only that, smoke, as well as the debris from the fireworks. It's not a very pleasant
So you want to
thing.
be on the other side of the wind.
You want to be at least
the wind
90
at your back.
degrees to it, or wind at your back.
Okay.
Yes. So that's
Okay.
kind of important.
Now, what about the foreground objects? You know, I mean, one of the ladies here in town who I've tried to get her on the show several times. She's such a good photographer. Her name is Jenny Brinkman, and she does great pictures of the fireworks every year. And part of what makes them so good is she has interesting things in the foreground. And I look around, I just see a bunch of people. I don't see what she sees for some reason. And then I see her pictures. I'm like, dang, she is good, man. But how do you choose what goes in the foreground, and how close should you be to them? And
Well, things that are in the foreground, if it's a building, well, then you don't want to be too close. You want that building to have its own light source, of course, and now you're going to complicate the exposure, because the fireworks is going to be f11. Now you can make the building work at f11 if you want to see those lights, but you got to know how much time so that building is exposed properly. So that makes things a little difficult when you start putting things, unless you want a silhouette.
that's what she almost always does.
Yeah.
Or she uses the reflection of the water.
Now that is a no-brainer. What I like to do if you have a reflection of water is you're on tripod, get right next to the water, put that tripod as low as you can to the water, and then you get these nice reflections in the water from the fireworks.
Okay.
Now one year I was shooting at Weewahitchka, that's northern part of Florida, on a lake, and as I'm doing this, I noticed this little child. I don't know if I sent you that image or not, and he was more interested in the things running around the water than he was the fireworks. And it made this greatest picture, seeing all these fireworks above and in the water, and here's this kid playing in the water. I guess he saw minnows or a crab or something, I don't know what, but it was kind of cute. But that will complicate things as far as your exposure. And all I can say with that is I've used flash fill before if you have a child, but then they got to be close.
Yeah.
Because again, you're using f11. What flash will expose somebody at f11? There's not many.
Yeah.
Usually it requires a little more high-powered scope.
So probably most of them would be silhouettes.
Yes.
Or like she did. She had, like, one time she had people like right on the edge of the water, and the reflection kind of reflected back onto their face. It was so cool. That girl's amazing. Oh,
there's actually a lot of variables, and you're taking it many steps deeper into the professional area of I assume she's professional, or she's been doing it a
Yeah,
lot.
she is.
Yeah.
She is. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've scouted out a spot. I'm going to try to, like, okay, many times fireworks are near water, so you should get there
Right.
early, right? So that you can kind of get a good spot, and
Yep.
hopefully nobody will sit right in front of you, some big 6'10" guy sit in front of you. But
that does happen. These are heavily congested areas, but you'd be surprised. Like, let's come back to that tripod. What does
Okay.
it do?
It lifts-
establishes real estate.
Oh,
Not so much
yeah.
getting up high. You plant it down there, and people tend to stay away from it. Believe it
or
or
they
not.
sit down in front of it.
and
So they're
you're
up
above it.
Yeah, that's.
But
that's
if
a
you're
good
low
point.
and you're right next to the water, well, they're not going to get in the water unless you're at the beach or something silly
Yeah,
like that.
that's a good point.
So I've had good luck by getting there early, planting that tripod, and nobody will sit in front of it.
All right, so should we be taking horizontal shots or vertical shots, or does that depend on like what you have for your foreground, maybe?
Well, that's a difficult question. I usually shoot horizontal, but often I end up cropping to a vertical because
Okay.
fireworks are high and they tend to shoot off in one spot, so you really don't have something happening in a horizontal. So more often than not, it's going to be vertical, I would think. I don't know.
But you shoot horizontally just because
I
it's easier
shoot-
on the
yeah,
tripod?
No, well, it's easier to manage, yes. And I do have a really high resolution camera, which
Helps.
I don't have a problem cropping
Yeah.
to 1/4 actually of the frame and still having a really nice image. But I was most likely I would say horizontal. But if you get there and you have a lens that isn't super wide, you may have to go vertical. Just be flexible on that. I without knowing the situation, like if you got people in front of it that you want silhouetted, I mean, that's a difficult
That's another
thing that
thing
you're
to-
not going to know until you're there.
Okay. So what you said you like to shoot with a wide lens, like how wide?
I shoot a 15mm lens.
15 on a
15
full frame?
On a full frame, but I get as close as I can, and well, it is a zoom. It's 15 to 30, so I
Okay.
have quite a bit of range there.
But now, like, say it's at the Naples Pier, and they shoot off the end of the pier. If you're at a 15 to 30 millimeter
That's not gonna
lens,
work.
you'd be
Yeah,
too close.
That's not going to work. That's too close.
Wouldn't you?
I would think that you'd be too far with a 15mm.
Wouldn't you have mostly pier in the foreground, though?
It depends how close you're to the pier.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the shots I see from your website, from students and whatnot, is of the whole pier.
Yeah.
And if you got that whole pier, I guarantee you're going to have the fireworks in it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But do you
that's-
want the whole pier? Wouldn't that be distracting to the fireworks?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay.
If you, I mean, it's. I guess another thing when you're talking about this is also when you're setting up, you got to make sure that you have your horizontal lines correct.
Oh,
because if
good
it's tilted,
point.
you know, that destroys everything. Especially at pier, you have the horizon. You need to check that. Once again, you're there early, so you set that all up. You make sure that's fine. So the only adjustment you may have to do is tilt it higher or lower, and you base that on when the fireworks are going on.
Okay. All right, so let's go to, so the lens, it sounds like the lens doesn't really matter that much.
Only if you're too far away and you have to use a telephoto, well, your focus is a little more critical. You have to make sure you're on manual and you pre-focus. If you have a wider lens, most likely you're going to be focused on infinity, right?
Okay, so tell us, let's talk about focusing. How are we going to focus? You're going to hit that little
You have
button
to
on
have
your
it on
lens to manual focus, which is
because
tough
a
for
camera,
people.
Yeah, a camera will not know where to focus if you have autofocus on. It's going to be zooming in and out.
So how do you determine where to focus?
Most lenses I ever have, right on the top of the lens, you see this little curly Q thing that says infinity. You just go, whoop, there you are.
And how do you know that's going to work?
Yeah, you're making it hard for me today.
I know.
With a
I just
wide
think
angle
like my
lens.
customers, like, I don't get it. Maybe I do understand, but I want to make sure they understand.
Look through the viewfinder. If you're not confident, take a picture and look at it and zoom it in. That'd be one method.
Now, one thing that you can do, like when I teach the 4 weeks to proficiency in photography
Right.
is our signature course, which, by the way, shooting in manual is the first class, which David said is important. But I always say, I want you to look through the viewfinder, not live view, while you're learning, because I want them to get used to looking at the meter.
Right.
But for fireworks, maybe live view is a better idea. Is it? What do you think? Because on live
when
view,
I
you can
set up-
zoom in before you take the picture.
This is the crazy thing, is
Okay.
if you do all the pre-planning and you get there early, you set it up on tripod, you have everything set up, I don't look in the viewfinder ever again until the show is done. That's the way I shoot.
I don't know what this is the
You
first
don't
time
know it?
somebody made me speechless.
Because everything's predetermined. If you did your job right ahead of time. Now, no, that's not going to work all the time. I'll give you that. What if you set up and you think the fireworks are there and they're happening over there? You're going to have to turn the camera, of course. But you're not going to have time to pick up your rig and race down somewhere else.
Right.
That's one of the reasons for all this pre-setup stuff.
Okay.
Because you're in a crowd.
Yeah.
And you're in a crowd with a camera, tripod,
Bag.
yeah. You might have the kids with you. I don't know about you. When I go to fireworks, I go to enjoy them too.
Ah.
It shouldn't be work. All the work you did the day before. So you set up, you have everything with cable release, and you just go click, click, click.
But how do you know exactly where the fireworks are going to be? I mean, I have a general idea. When I go to the pier, they're going to be around the pier somewhere, but I don't know exactly where they're going to go up.
The event organizer,
You can really.
and they will tell you where they're being set up from. Tell them that you're doing photography of the event, and you have to know where. And they'll even tell you how far, that you can be from that point. I've actually driven up to a boat, by boat, and set up 200 yards from the actual barge that they're shooting from.
Wow.
They know how many people come to these things. They know people want to know this stuff.
Yeah.
They're very cooperative.
Wow. I never would have thought to do that.
I do it a lot now.
It's a great idea.
So
Okay, so let's go back to focusing. So if you're on infinity, it's focusing.
that infinity is as far away as possible.
And beyond.
But you have to think this too. If you've got a wide angle lens and f11, you've got a little bit of depth of field there. So it's going to be infinity probably to 50 feet, I would imagine, depending on the lens.
Okay.
With the lens I use, 11 will get me infinity to, around that,
Okay.
to about
okay.
50 feet. So I don't really have to think about it.
And they're sharp.
And they're always tack sharp, yes.
So you're saying ISO 200, f11. Those are just,
That's a given. That's
Okay.
a gimme.
and you vary the shutter speed. How do you?
And
how do
the
you?
only reason I vary the shutter speed, well, there's two reasons. How much of a trail do you want? Sometimes I want to see the trail of the actual firework being fired from the ground. Pop. You hear the big boom. Pop. And you see that thing going up, and then it goes boom. That's like 15 seconds. There we go. I want a 15-second exposure.
Okay.
Now, there are some variables involved with even that, because as the fireworks shows go on, smoke starts getting really heavy and thick, especially towards the end, the finale. And long exposures, like 15 seconds, you're going to start seeing the smoke in your exposure.
So you want a shorter exposure at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's
now,
good
this
advice.
leads into another topic that I know you're not ready for, but, but that's when I start getting into image stacking. I shorten my exposures. In Photoshop, I'll start stacking these images and let the multiple fireworks show through that way. But we'll talk about that when you're ready.
Okay, maybe we better talk about it now because I'll forget.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what do you mean you image stacking? How do you
well,
image
you've
stack?
got this thing on tripod, right? And you're shooting the same thing over and over and over again. So you
And
can
are you on single drive mode where you're just one shot at a time?
one shot at a time.
You're not on continuous drive mode?
I'm not on continuous. You can go into Photoshop. Well, you look through your imagery and you go, well, I like this one, this one, this one, and I'll put it all in layers. And then there's a layer mode in Photoshop. You can click one of the lighten. There's 4 lighten modes in there. You'll see a little line between the different modes.
They're called blending modes.
They're blending modes, right? I forget exactly which one it is, but play with them.
But it's in the lighten section?
Yeah, it's in the lighten section. Play with that. I think it's the 3rd one from down.
Okay.
And it just, bang, it's like all of a sudden additional firework is added to your image. Now, if you're seeing other things.
So what does it do? It brings the light from the other from the other picture come through?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I'm going to try that. I never knew that.
I use a lot.
I use a lot of blending modes, but that I didn't know.
And it's all because of the smoke starts getting too intense and it just doesn't look that good.
Yeah, the smoke ruins it.
But in the beginning, well, here's the cool thing. In the beginning, there's almost no smoke.
So that's when you do the long exposures.
So you can get, so here, you know, when you start doing the blending stuff, you can take some of your earlier photos and then some of your later photos, which have different shutter times, and you put them all together and you get this nice clear. Now when that doesn't work is if there's people silhouetted in it.
Oh, because then they're going to be all blurry and weird looking. Yeah.
That won't work. That's only if you're shooting strictly fireworks.
Without the foreground.
If there's reflection in the water, that works for you. Those reflections come out too.
Okay.
Okay. It's pretty cool to use, and the ultimate tool, if there's something in there you don't like, you add a mask, make sure that it's black, and you just paint in. But that's another.
And by the way, I have to keep putting my little pitches in there because we do have an online class. I think it's called Photoshop Cram Course, and I teach masking in there. To me, it's important in the first class. I mean, it's not. They're like little short videos, like 5-minute videos. There's just a whole bunch of them.
Anyone that uses adjustment layers in Photoshop, it automatically creates a mask, each adjustment. So you should be used to that, anyone that uses those features.
Okay.
So.
All right, so let's see what other I wanted to ask you. I had something in it, flitted in and out of my mind because we just talked about processing a little bit. But I still had questions about shooting. Oh, did I already ask this? Or did I keep thinking? I don't want to forget to ask this. Okay, so if I have a shutter speed, okay, I'm at ISO 200, f11. My shutter speed's 30 seconds on this one. My shutter speed's 10 seconds on this one. Aren't I overexposing the light?
No.
How come I'm not overexposing?
It's painting with light. You're capturing light trails.
Uh-huh.
Imagine you open the shutter and you have a flashlight and you go like this. What's that going to see on film? It's going to see a line of light that's painted onto your charge coupled device. Couldn't think what that was for a moment. What is that? It's not film. But it's the same thing. You're photographing something you cannot capture fast. It's a light trail. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like
and if it's 5 seconds, you have a shorter trail. If it's 30 seconds, you have a longer trail. Like the firework that goes off from the ground up. If you want that, that's going to take 5-10 seconds, whatever it is. Then you still have that burst, and sometimes it's multiple bursts. Well, if you want to capture it all, and things are you catch the light there, and then it's black behind. You're only photographing that light, leaving a trace.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So the light is basically the light is overexposed anyway, is what you're saying.
to some degree.
And all you're doing is capturing it. But what makes the colors of fireworks?
That's the they put some kind of phosphorus
I'm just wondering
powder
why wouldn't that overexpose, like the red turn white?
Oh, okay. Let's go back to our formula. We've already figured that out.
Okay.
ISO 200 at F11, you will maintain those colors.
Oh.
Okay, because it's a light trail. If it's a red light trail, it's not overexposing.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it any better than that. I mean, okay, let's explain it this way. If you did ISO 200 at F8, now you turn that red to white because you're, what, 4 stops brighter?
But when you're doing the slow shutter speed, you're also 4 stops brighter.
Because it's a moving source. It's that moving source. That's a constant moving source in fireworks.
Okay.
It's not real fast, it's not real slow, but it's fairly consistent. You cannot shoot.
Okay, I'm starting to get it because it's a moving source. You're shooting at F. Let's say it. Well, no, the F stuff is always 11, but your shutter speed is 10 seconds. And basically, you're not getting the whole light trail at 10 seconds, where you would get it at 30
light
seconds.
Is moving, so
okay.
you know.
See, I have a slow mind.
Yeah. It's no different than capturing light trails from cars or light painting techniques when you're swirling things around.
But I've overexposed when I've done that. If I'm light painting onto something, I've overexposed.
Oh, that's onto something. That's different. Now, if we're light painting this, and your time is
and
wrong.
when you remember, this is a podcast. When you say this, you're talking about the glass or whatever.
My hand's waving back and forth.
But if you're light painting on something, you can overexpose it. But if you're just capturing the light,
something that's
because it's moving, you're just capturing the light. Okay, I got it. That was good.
It's not much different than lightning, similar in the sense where it's almost the same formula. You know, you can use ISO 200 F11 while lightning's going on, and if you've got a totally black background, you can open up the shutter. Just hold it open. The lightning's not going to happen in the same spot each time. You'll get multiple strikes in one frame.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've never even tried to photograph lightning. A guy named Jeff Thomas wrote a blog article for us, and I'm like, I got to do that. He made it sound so simple. He's like, just go out in your front yard. Yep. You know what I mean? To me, I think you have to be on a bridge and risk your life and all. And he's like, just go in your front yard. Yeah. It's Florida. There's a lot of lightning.
Well, I'll go to a pavilion overhang, but it's the same principle. That flash happens. It doesn't happen in the exact same spot, so it's not going to overexpose because it'll happen over in the left frame once, over in the right frame, center frame, and you'll end up with multiple lightning. It's almost the same.
I kind of get
That's
it though.
That's not a light trail, but it's different areas of the charge couple device that is getting exposed.
That makes sense. And then, so going back to fireworks, if you are getting that reflection, there you have to be careful because you could overexpose that reflection if you did a 30-second exposure, because then the light is falling on something.
Only if you have ambient light on the water. If there's, well, see, that's what you might not be thinking about, is if there's ambient light anywhere. Fireworks are done when it's total darkness. They don't shoot before that. Now you'll have some of the homemade ones that people are firing off because they're anxious to get it going. But other than that, if there's other light sources, lamps, buildings, then you can have overexpose of just the buildings, but not of the fireworks.
But what about the reflection on the water? Couldn't that be overexposed?
Only if there's some kind of ambient light.
Because it's moving too much.
The same thing applies. That reflection is being traced just like the ones that are in the air.
Okay.
It's just a reflection of it. Basically, call it a mirror.
Okay.
Okay. if you're, let's put it this way, if you're near the water and there's some lights behind you that are lighting up the water where you can actually see the water, yes, you could end up with some overexposed.
Okay. All right, I got another question. How do we time our shots? So when do we know when to hit the shutter?
Fortunately, this thing goes on for about 30 minutes. It's easy. It's one of these things you just kind of play with. If you want the whole trail from the moment the missile mortar is launched, you'll hear a boom.
And so
Open the shutter.
you hear that boom, you click.
And you'll see the thing swirling up into the air and exploding. Not all the time does that work that well. Like we said, once you get later into the show when there's a lot of smoke, forget trying to capture that. You can just look up in the sky, and when you see it pop, you can open the shutter then.
Yeah.
And you can actually wait until that goes out and then close the shutter. I mean, it's experimenting.
Now,
even for me, who's done it year after year after year, it's always an experiment.
Now, why don't you use continuous drive mode and take a bunch of shots?
I don't know. You probably could. I've never tried it. I've never tried that. I like control, I guess. I'll do things like that in post, in Photoshop. Why bother?
I do.
Too much effort.
I'll tell you what I do, because I've never, I say I've never shot fireworks, and that's not true in any way, because I have shot fireworks, but I'm always working. I work at a private club. I do their photography for events.
Right.
So I work at a private club every 4th of July, and they're pretty far away from the pier. So I use my long lens with no tripod, because I can't bring a tripod in.
Yeah.
And I do continuous drive mode, and I have a pretty fast shutter speed and a high ISO.
So you're capturing multiple short trails, and then it's being combined.
Maybe. I don't know. They don't come out that great, but they come out because they just want, you know, they're not looking for fancy pictures. They just want, here's our party, here were some fireworks, you know. And they don't want me sitting out there with a tripod for, you know, the whole time, and because they want me to get the reactions, because I try to get.
Yeah, they want.
Well,
to
I
see
try to, when the
people having
reflection
fun.
happens, I try to get it on the people's faces sometimes. You know, I've got that, my ISO on like 1,000,000 or something, because I don't use a tripod. Plus, you can't use a tripod for people. But I've done that a couple times with just another event. I worked an anniversary party, and they had fireworks, and they forgot to tell me they were going to do that. So that was like, oh my gosh, you know, I start messing around because your flash doesn't go that far. I was using flash, you know. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so just timing, you're just going to kind of get the feel of it as you go.
Well, you can. I mean, you know, and like I said, you know, your average shutter time, let's not say speed, that's kind of irrelevant, it's probably going to be 2 to 5 seconds for individual explosions.
Okay.
And I definitely want as many individual explosions in the beginning, because I will go into post-processing and do a little bit of blending. I've had a few rather large companies come to me, I gotta buy that, nobody's catching these fireworks like what I pay for. I go, no, they're not.
And they really aren't, you're just blending them.
Well, it did happen that way, sort of. I mean,
just not all at the same time.
Not all at the same time, exactly.
That's a really cool trick, though. I'm gonna practice that. I wish I had some fireworks. Maybe I do. I can go back to the 4th of July at the club from last year and find my shots. And
I mean, even with okay, we talked about wide-angle lenses and stuff like that. For the individual fireworks, that might be a time if you got a second camera. It'd be better because we've gone through all the trouble of getting things set up. If you have another camera, some, not many do, I'll try to get some close-ups early on, and then I'll scale them up and down and so on, because it's on just black background in the sky, where I'm using like a 50mm lens or maybe a little longer.
Okay.
but you don't want to disturb that one unless you're used to shooting fireworks. I hate to advise that to anyone unless they've got a little more experience.
Yeah. That's cool though. I remember that, to put the tripod real close to the water and low for the cool reflections too. That's and maybe that's why she gets those great silhouettes too. She could be really low getting the people. She gets like people watching the fireworks, kids playing. She's amazing.
I've seen some shots like that, and I always like them. But I tend to try to find easy in, easy out, because wow, fireworks. You go down, and then you leave, and everybody wants to leave at the same time. I remember I used to go down with all my gear on a motorcycle, so I could weave in and get right there, and then it's time to leave. You weave out, but then you got all that gear on you. I'm too old for that anymore.
I have advice on that because I work at this club down in Port Royal, right? And to get out after the fireworks, I don't even try.
Yeah.
I just sit at the club and I read a book.
There you go.
Well, but they throw me out, right? Because I don't know why. The other help doesn't live in Port Royal. The people, the members, they all live right there. They just go home on their little golf carts, But we don't live in that area. So last year, they kicked me out, and I went on my, what do you call it? The Google Maps. Like it wasn't Waze, but it was like, the Google Maps, and said directions home.
Right.
I mean, I worked there for 10 years. I know how to get home, right? I never thought to use but that app took me.
Yeah.
It was a little bit longer, but I got out so fast compared to what I normally do.
Well, and tell you the truth, because I do a lot of fireworks, I tend to not only scope out how and where, but my entry in and my exit.
Yeah.
Now, I might have to hike out a mile, but I hike out to a point where I know I can get in the car and I just drive
out. Yeah.
All right. Now in Naples, I don't know if you're going to do that.
There's no place good to park in Naples. It's just,
Find a friend
who lives nearby. Well, you know what? We looked on Airbnb. We thought, the family will rent a house downtown. Oh my God, they jacked the prices up on 4th of July weekend, and they all have 3-day minimum. And
well, and again, I mentioned boat. Man, I tell you, there's nothing better than doing fireworks. It's a good and a bad by boat.
Okay, explain how to do that, because isn't it too shaky?
Well, why I'm coming to that, it's always easy out. Always. Shaky, yes. Now you're limiting yourself to those shorter exposures, 1 second exposures. You go longer than 1 second, and you'll see your fireworks won't have that nice, smooth arch. You'll have this wiggly because the boat is bouncing a little bit. But I will anchor with 2 anchors, fore and aft. I'll do everything I can to stabilize the boat. But I tell you now, there's always that late comer, and they're going slow and whatnot. But the slightest wake is going to. Yeah. You'll find that by boat, I would say 50% of your images aren't going to be any good.
Okay.
Because you're doing long exposures, and long exposures on the boat just don't work that well. But my best fireworks, I sent you a sample, was by boat. It was at Lashley. And I was right there by the barge. I got all these things going off, police boat, their blue and red lights down at the ground. I mean, it turned out really good.
That's so cool. And
which you wouldn't see from land. And of course, it's over. Just pull up anchor and you go.
Not here in Naples. The problem here is you have to go down the Gordon River to get back, and that's a big traffic jam of boats.
Well, I'm used to North Dakota. It's on the harbor, well, Peace River, but still, it's good grief. That's 3 miles across, so it's easy to get in.
Yeah, not here. When you go to the fireworks, you just have to plan to just be there. In fact, last year I was trying to find somebody to meet me because at the 3rd Street area I can get there. I said, somebody meet me at the bar, we'll go and have a drink, and nobody would. I have no friends. I'm just kidding.
But I guess that's another point, too. How many fireworks go on In Naples. There's
Just
more
two.
than one. No way. Just two?
Sugden Park, I went once. I'll never go back there again.
Oh, wow.
It was, well, of course, now I work every week, every 4th of July, but the time I went to Sugden Park, it was just too many, and I know I'm going to sound like a terrible snob, but too many handmade fireworks were going on there, and I was afraid for my life. And it wasn't any easier to get out of there.
When I lived in Panama City, I loved it because you had Mexico Beach, then you had Panama City, then you had, there'd be 5 fireworks going on at the same time.
Nice.
And I could watch each one of them from my backyard.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
But that's another story.
All right, so let's go through your summary of the five tips, or however many tips. I already know F11, ISO 200.
Shutter cord.
Shutter cord.
Attached. Shutter cord, yeah.
Yes.
A real cable.
I'm with you on that one, man.
Tripod, wind direction.
Oh, wind direction. I forgot that one. That's a good one.
And what's sad about that is you could pre-plan everything and the wind's blowing the opposite direction after you decided all this. You're going to have to change because you don't want all that debris. I've been in that situation. I've also, well, I'm used to pre-planning because of wind. When I worked for the Navy, we would photograph LCATs. These are the giant air cushion boats. And once I set up a tripod with my $10,000 video camera, downwind from one of these things launched, I got drenched. Salt water.
Oh my God.
But that's another thing. But that's back to wind direction. Very important. You don't want to be loaded with debris,
Downwind.
and plus the smoke comes right at you, which is going to lessen your
Okay,
pictures.
that's really good advice. So what's coming up for you, David? David Sussman?
Oh my! I'm always
What do you got
working
going on?
Something. Jeez.
You are a very active person.
I don't like being bored. Let me think. I don't know. I've got a lot of things in the hopper. Last time I spoke, I still haven't finished any of the old projects. I was working on my game traps.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and they worked well, but the battery capacity of these traps was only 3 days. And so I had to find, and I finally just got a solution for that where it'll last a month. Because once you set up a game trap in the wild, you might have a game trail. Well, where I live, there's multiple game trails. The moment these critters know that you set up something different, they'll use another trail. So you really need something that can stay out a month.
Yeah.
Well, I finally extended the range, duration of my battery life. So I hope to have something going on with that soon.
That's really cool.
And I'm refining some macro techniques in the micro range where I'll be doing stair stepping a lot more detailed, 8:1 ratios, which means your focus is in microns. And your depth of field is in microns.
Oh my
gosh. So the only way you can
gosh.
get something sharp is by shooting and stair stepping. They call it stepping.
Right, yeah.
And that's done, I've done it manually, doesn't work that well. I've got a motorized version coming where it will move micron at a time and automatically trigger the camera for me. So I just set it up and I go. Downside of that is if you got an insect and it moves,
Yeah.
well, now you got this little antenna, extra
What do
antenna.
they stick the insects in the refrigerator, don't they? Is
You
that what they do to
can,
make them
but
slow?
You can, but if you learn the life cycle of your insect that you're going after, like a spider, for instance, when nighttime comes, they tend to crawl into a little back area hole. So if you grab that spider in his tiny little nest, now I'm talking about certain jumping spider, for instance, you could bring it in and make sure the lights are all off, and then you can photograph, set it up, and you get your photographic going, and it will remain pretty much motionless for you.
Always got to know your subject.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. Well, same thing with the game traps. I've been chasing a bobcat around the property, and every time I set something up, he's gone somewhere else. I have caught a picture of a coyote that grabbed a piglet running off in, yeah.
Wow, that's a
So
cool.
that's kind of interesting. But you know, just different
You just
things.
are always on the go, and you've got
Yeah.
such a good technical mind, and so experiment like crazy. Your pictures, and I'm just going to talk to the audience for a minute. You have to see some of his pictures now. David has given us some fireworks pictures to put in the show notes here, but we're also going to put a link to his website, which is.
The one I would recommend go to that I contribute regularly is facebook.com/DW Sussman. That's DWSUSSMAN.
Okay.
And I try to post once a day. Sometimes it's really cool. Sometimes it's just local event going on that I report on. Like right now we have a mural artist in Punta Gorda that's doing this gorgeous water life type scene that I just reported on. So I consider myself a little bit of a Facebook reporter, I guess. But I also like doing, I'll show some of my creative stuff from day to day that I'm working on.
Your stuff is amazing, so
No,
check it
thanks.
out. And you also have another website, like a real website that you don't update.
DWSussman.com will go into a little more detail of who I am and what projects I might be taking. I have a few tips. I have a tips link there, but I haven't updated it lately. And actually, I hope providing you some video lessons in the
We're
near
going to work
future.
on that.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
upcoming.
And we also talked about a possible Facebook competition, which I haven't let go of. I still have a stumbling block with a company that I want to have part in, but I haven't gotten any distance with that yet, and I might have to just move on without them.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for being on the show again.
Hey, thank you.
I think
for
you're the
inviting me.
only, is he the only guest who's been on 3 times?
Except Joe.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
Oh, Joe. No, I've seen his work. He's a good guy.
Joe's amazing.
Yeah, indeed.
Hey, audience, I'm hoping that you'll do us a big favor and leave us a review on iTunes. It's so helpful to us, and we really, really appreciate it. Remember, the 4 weeks to proficiency in photography it's an online class, but it's interactive. So yes, it's a video class, but it's not like we're just going to throw a video at you and say, you know, never see you again. You are going to have homework that you're supposed to turn in. Not everybody does. And if you join the class, you'll see that. I probably have maybe 10% of the people actually participate, which is a little frustrating. I've got to figure out how to get people to participate better, because the homework really, really helps more than anything. First class is shoot and manual, second class is composition, third class is lighting, including flash, how to balance your flash with your background, and then the fourth class is, we call it the techie stuff. So check that out on our website at understandphotography.com, and if you just put a /schedule, or you can click on schedule and see when the next class is going to be. I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks you so much for watching the Understand Photography Show. Good luck with your fireworks pictures.
Get up!